Hey guys, Todd Anderson here alongside Tom Ross.
What's up, everybody?
We're going to be doing a deck tech with a new deck from the new standard featuring Battle for Zendikar. I'm going to be playing an Esper tap-out control deck today. Obviously, it looks pretty clunky. I'm sure there's going to be a few cards spoiled by the time this goes up that would naturally make the cut, but we had some cool stuff at our disposal already, so I thought it'd be good to just go ahead and give them a try in this video. But let's go and take a look at the deck and talk about all the new cards. So, as we talked about earlier in the week, I think that it's pretty clear that Hangerback Walker is just one of the best cards in the format. Most decks will have an answer to it, but it's really just this buffer for most decks to make sure you don't lose the early game to like an aggressive deck. And then it's a mana sink. You can do some cool stuff with it alongside like Sorin and the tokens. But for the most part, I think Hangerback is just going to be an all-star of the new standard unless something drastic happens.
Yeah, I agree. Just coming down on 2 fits in any deck right now. When the format gets smaller, like it's about to, then cards like this just get more powerful. Cards like Magma Spray and Anger of the Gods rotating out. So, yeah, it's going to be tough to remove Hangerback Walker. We need to figure out a new way, possibly Silk Wraps or something.
Yeah. So this deck is just an Esper tap-out control deck. We're going to be, using removal spells early on. We're going to be trying to build our board with Planeswalkers like the new Gideon Ally of Zendikar. We also have Obnixilis Reignited, Sorin Solemn Visitor, Narset Transcendence, which I'm not sure if this is going to be good, but it seems like it could be really good in a deck that the only creature is Hangerback Walker. We hit on half the time with her since we have 26 lands and 4 Hangerbacks. But the new cards that I really wanted to try out to see if they were actually good is 4 copies of Ruinous Path, which is just the new replacement for Hero's Downfall. But in a tap-out style control deck, they're going to get to points in the game where you get to actually trigger the Awaken and start beating down with a 4/4 land. We also have 4 copies of Planar Outburst, which, similarly to Ruinous Path, it's just generally well costed on the front side, and then the Awaken cost is just an added bonus. I think this card's going to be better than In Hostilities. There's not a whole lot of stuff in the format now that really attaches to creatures, so the extra thing on In Hostilities is probably worse than Awaken on this.
Yeah, it feels like you don't even really need a dedicated win condition anymore, say like a Dragonlord Ojutai, or even way back when they were playing like Pearl Lake Ancient and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you just get to randomly have these 4/4s that are bonuses to your already decently costed spells. We lose the instant speed on the Hero's Downfall for Ruinous Path, but Planar Outburst feels just like a strict upgrade to In Hostilities right now. Other than that, we have 4 ways to exile Hangerback Walker, as well as just generic spot removal in Stasis Snare in Utter End. We have 1 copy of Ultimate Price. I think this card's going to falter a little bit at the beginning. This is a Devoid/colorless set coming out with Battle, but also, the block before that, we had Khans of Tarkir, which focused heavily on multicolored creatures, and so Ultimate Price, could not be very good, but I want to make sure that I have at least 1 cheap way to kill something, and I didn't want it to be Murderous Cut because we already have 4 copies of Treasure Cruise. We're main decking 4 copies of Duress. We don't actually have Thoughtseize anymore in the format, and I wanted to be able to interact with my opponent early on in case I didn't draw Hangerback Walker. Being able to take stuff like their Treasure Cruises. In this matchup, I'm going to take like Jeskai Ascendancy, Token Producers, but in a number of other matchups, Planeswalkers are going to be a big deal, removal spells are going to be a big deal, and being able to fill my graveyard quickly for Treasure Cruise and just having cheap spells to cast early on or post Treasure Cruise, I think is going to be really important. I think that about does it. Mana base is pretty heavy on the fetches in the new dual lands. The Sunken Hollows and Prayer Streams, I think, are going to be pretty sweet. We have a lot of basic lands, and so they're going to come into play untapped a lot. And then, since we are a base black-white deck, we have 4 Caves of Koilos. I wouldn't mind trying out a version of this deck that plays, a lot more of the come into play tap gain life lands from Khans of Tarkir, and those might end up being a little bit better than playing so many basics, but since we're playing 8 fetches, I thought that just having access to enough lands to fetch out later in the game I thought might be important, but since we can fetch out these, it might not be necessary to have this many. So, alright guys, well, that's the main deck for Esper Super Friends. Let's go and take a look at the sideboard, and then we'll get to Tom's deck. All right, so here on the sideboard, I wanted to have a lot of ways to shore up the creature matchups. Our removal is kind of clunky in game one against things like mono red. We're not exactly able to kill things like Anafenza too easily, and so I wanted to have ways in the sideboard to really hammer those decks. Languish is just a cheap sweeper, but it's also great against Anafenza and the like. Self-inflicted wound similarly good against those decks. Green or white-based aggressive strategies. Ration Cleric, phenomenal against Mono Red. Probably better than Surge of Righteousness, which I've seen a lot of people trying out, and I'm not really a huge fan of it. Cleric can just come down, gain some initial life, and really just brick wall sometimes their entire team, especially so if they're on the Dragon Fodder into Hordeling Outburst plan.
Yeah, Mono Red's always a default new deck whenever a format rotates, so I do expect it to be in some numbers right on week one.
Yep, we have 3 more copies of Ultimate Price that are great against the Thunderbreak Regent decks. There are a lot of cheap creatures, and also fat creatures like Thunderbreak Regent that died Ultimate Price, and having a cheap way to kill those allows you to use your mana efficiently on various turns of the game, where you get to double spell with Ultimate Price into a Planeswalker, or even just Ultimate Price into a Treasure Cruise. So I think having access to the full set of those after sideboard is important. And then against the slow grinding matchups where my life total doesn't matter as much, we have 2 more Reads the Bones as additional card advantage alongside the Treasure Cruises to go super deep into the late game. All right, guys, well, that's all for Esper Super Friends. Let's go ahead and get to Tom's deck, and then we'll get to battling.